Ladies and gentlemen, with regards to the current ongoing situation in Israel, what happens in the next few days, whether at all there's going to be a ground offensive or not? Is there building international pressure on Israel at this point in time to perhaps even go slow when it comes to their retaliatory strikes, keeping in mind the current situation in Gaza? In a short while from now, we'll also be joined by Israel Prime Minister Office's spokesperson, Mr. Levy, in a short while from now. I'm told that Mr. Levy has already joined us on this broadcast. Mr. Levy, thank you very much for joining us on Republic TV as we continue with our rolling coverage.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Over the last few days, Mr. Levy, we have spoken to several survivors on this entire matter, and we see the current situation being the way it is. As far as India is concerned, our position has been extremely clear that there can be no compromise with terror. So let me begin by asking you this question about the current situation, because there have been some sort of advices that have been given to you by the United Nations. Antonio Guterres says that 1.1 million people to be evacuated from Gaza cannot perhaps be done in such a short period of time. As a spokesperson of Israel's Prime Minister's office, could you give us a sense of what's really happening in terms of the evacuation and what lies ahead?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to relate what you said at the beginning. India really has been a solid supporter of Israel during this war, a war that was forced on us, understands that there can be no compromise with bloodthirsty terrorists who committed an ISIS-style atrocity last week, and Israel is very appreciative of India's support. Now, as for the humanitarian situation inside the Gaza Strip, look, we're watching the same images on TV, and I know that the situation inside the Gaza Strip is difficult to see. Here's the situation as Israel sees it. Israel intends to destroy Hamas. Israel intends to destroy the terrorist organization that perpetrated the ISIS-style atrocities of the 7th of October. And in order to do that, in order to strike the legitimate terrorist targets inside the Gaza Strip, it is asking civilians to get out of harm's way temporarily for their own safety to the south of Gaza. We know that it's difficult. We know that it's not going to be easy, but Israel doesn't want civilians to be hurt. We do not want to see any more suffering. And that is why Israel is saying that the people of Gaza who are, by the way, themselves victims of Hamas, because Hamas has embedded its terrorist infrastructure under their schools, under their homes, under their hospitals. The civilians of Gaza need to temporarily evacuate to the south of Gaza so that Israel can attack Hamas targets inside the northern Gaza Strip.
Mr. Levy, I also want to understand from you in terms of the challenges that you essentially face. Let's be very clear, you've given enough indications that this time it's going to be very different. The war has been going on for a very, very long time, but this war is very different. So one cannot perhaps rule out the possibility of a ground offensive to take place, keeping in mind the mobilization of troops that have taken place. Give us a sense of the criticality at this point in time.
That's very important for viewers to understand, because I'm sure your viewers have watched the multiple rounds of fighting between Israel and Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. And it's important to remember something about this particular round. It's not a round of fighting. This is a war. This is a war that Hamas waged on Israel, that it launched on Israel with an act of war, with a war crime. The October 7th massacre, when they butchered 1,300 people, injured nearly 4,000 people, took nearly 200 people hostages inside the Gaza Strip. That was a war crime. Israel was dragged into it, and Israel is going to defend itself now. This is an operation in which Israel has decided we can no longer exist with a terrorist organization like Hamas, with its ISIS-style atrocities on our borders so close to our home front. At the end of this war, we will create a new reality inside the Gaza Strip in which the terrorist organization that perpetrated the October 7th massacre, the worst terror attack in world history after 9/11, will no longer have an ability to harm Israeli civilians. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is worse than ISIS. And Israel intends to destroy Hamas just as the world destroyed ISIS, and the whole world enjoys so much more security for the way that the whole international community came together in order to destroy the terrorist death machine of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. And Israel is going to do exactly the same with Hamas, because we deserve exactly the same security that the rest of the world has from having defeated the awful, awful atrocities of the Islamic State ISIS group.
Mr. Levy, what is also very important, perhaps very little thought has been given by various media organizations, is also about the condition of the hostages that have been taken by the Hamas, which includes not just Israelis but also foreign nationals. Perhaps you've had some time to ponder upon this and questions that are essentially being asked. Could you give us a sense of what's the current situation like? How exactly is the government going to take this forward? Because that is going to be another major concern. If at all you go ahead with a ground offensive, what really happens to those very hostages who are still inside Gaza?
First of all, I'm glad that you're shining a spotlight on the plight of the Israeli hostages inside the Gaza Strip and reminding the world that Hamas attacked not only Israelis, but foreign nationals. In fact, Hamas attacked, killed, abducted, injured nationals of 42 states around the world. That is why we say that this was a crime against humanity. This was an attack on humanity, and that Israel's response to Hamas, destroying Hamas, is in defense of humanity. And let me be clear. The hostages that Hamas has taken inside the Gaza Strip, many of them civilians, children, some babies as young as a few months old, some elderly over the age of 80, without their medication. We do not know what fate has happened to them, in what ways Hamas is abusing them, how it's torturing them. And we demand the immediate and unconditional return of our hostages. These 199 Israeli hostages inside the Gaza Strip are our children, our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our grandparents, brutally abducted from their beds by death squads who murdered everyone in sight and took them back into the Gaza Strip as human booty. We demand their immediate return, and Israel will do whatever it can to make sure that our people return as soon as possible to the loving embrace of their families.
Mr. Levy, as I understand, there is no question of having any negotiation with a terrorist group like the Hamas. But will there be any back-channel talks or at least some pressure to be built on the Hamas through the Palestinian Authority? Is Israel open to talks with Palestine at this point in time, hoping there would be a safe return of those hostages? I'm asking you this question because there would be many family members who are equally worried today. If at all Israel goes ahead with a ground offensive, what really happens to the future of those hostages? So hence I'm asking you, is Israel open to talks with the Palestinian Authority?
First of all, the Palestinian Authority has no direct involvement with this. We're talking about hostages that have been abducted by Hamas and by Islamic Jihad, two proxies of the brutal regime in Iran, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, that are holding our people hostage inside the Gaza Strip, and we will do whatever we can in order to bring them home safely from captivity in the hands of these two genocidal terror organizations. And our expectations from the world, not only in making this demand that Hamas return our captives, is also that it treat Hamas like ISIS. And just as no country in the world would have diplomatic relations with ISIS, we expect no country in the world to have diplomatic relations with Hamas, no country in the world to give it shelter, to give it safe harbor. And we expect the international community to act forcefully to impose sanctions on whichever country is giving harbor to the new ISIS, to Hamas, the brutal terror organization that perpetrated the 7th of October massacre, butchering, beheading, burning whole families alive, now holding 199 vulnerable Israelis for the 10th day inside the Gaza Strip. We want them back, and we expect the world to apply all necessary pressure on Hamas, on its backers, to make sure that we have our children, our friends, our families, our grandparents back home safe and sound.
Mr. Levy, I would also like to touch upon other aspects with regards to whether at all are you right now looking at a two-front war, given the fact that Hezbollah too has been active. There have been attempts that have been made by the Hezbollah from the northern border. Could you give us a sense of what's really happening? How exactly are you tackling the threat emanating from Hezbollah at this point in time?
Hezbollah has been escalating its attacks on Israel on the northern border, and I want to make one thing clear. Israel does not want war with Hezbollah in the north, just as we didn't want this war that we have been dragged into with Hamas in the south. But if Israel is forced to fight on two fronts, both against Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north, we will fight on both fronts and we will win. We are ready to do so. And if Hezbollah drags Israel into a full-scale war, the state of Israel will hold the Lebanese state responsible with all attendant consequences. It's in that context that we are especially grateful to the United States for sending 2 aircraft carriers into the eastern Mediterranean in order to send a very clear message to Iran and to Hezbollah. I can only quote the words of our good friend President Biden in his very moving speech last week. He said to anyone thinking of messing with Israel at this time, our message can be summarized in one word: don't.
Mr. Levy, talking about some of the images that have come in from various kibbutz down south, it is horrifying to say the least. We here at Republic TV stand steadfastly with the authorities in Israel at this point in time with the action that you're taking. But I want to ask you this question because here in India, Israel was largely viewed with much fame because of the intelligence gathering, because of the way you've dealt with terrorism all this while. It comes across as a surprise to many of us here in India. How exactly could that have been possible? Some reports essentially been suggesting that military leaks have actually taken place from the Israeli side. You must have had some time to look into this entire matter, investigate as to what really went wrong on Saturday at 6:30 in the morning when you've had hundreds of Hamas terrorists entering the Israeli territory. What is it that you've learned from your preliminary investigation right now? How did Hamas manage to do what they did by entering the Israeli territory?
First of all, you're right to draw attention to the atrocities that were perpetrated inside the kibbutzim and at the Nova Music Festival, atrocities that truly have reminded many Israelis of the worst excesses of the Holocaust and Nazi war crimes and crimes against humanity. We have reports of Hamas using thermobaric weapons in order to incinerate whole families in their homes, of people beheaded, of rape, of people hiding in bomb shelters and having grenades thrown inside to blow them limb from limb. And with each report, our collective stomach turns and we feel sick to the core at the atrocities that Hamas inflicted against our people. And Israel will, in the due course of time, learn its full lessons about what went wrong. One thing already seems to be clear. Hamas was intent over very many years to convince Israel that since for 16 years it's been responsible for the people of the Gaza Strip, it has been governing the Gaza Strip since it violently took over, that it was interested in improving the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, in sending more residents of Gaza to work inside Israel. And that convinced Israel that Hamas was not looking for an immediate war. And now we know that this is what they were planning all along with this brutal crime against humanity. And I want your viewers to keep that in mind as we watch the next difficult phase of the war, that this war erupted because Hamas put so much effort into tricking the world that it cared about the humanitarian situation inside the Gaza Strip, that it cared about improving the lives of Palestinians, when we know now that Hamas has no regard for human life, that it uses innocent civilians as human shields. We just have a report now from UNRWA, the Palestinian Refugee Agency, that people from Hamas stole supplies from humanitarian shelters. And it's important to understand as we watch the scenes unfolding on our TV screens that the Gaza Strip remains controlled by a brutal terrorist organization that has brutalized and butchered our people, but also treats its own people, the civilians of the Gaza Strip, with extreme cruelty. And we hold all loss of human life, all harm to human life inside the Gaza Strip to be the sole responsibility of the ISIS-like terrorist organization that controls that strip of land.
Mr. Levy, many are still wondering how exactly did Hamas manage to have a stockpile of ammunition of this nature. AK-47s, Kalashnikovs were used by Hamas to carry out this massacre, which perhaps no one has seen for a very long time. I'm asking you this question because all this while there were a lot of speculations about Iran's role. Does Israel's Prime Minister's office at this point in time have any evidence of the role of any other country in backing Hamas, providing them with the kind of support they need? And many are still wondering what really happens to the role of countries like Turkey as well as Qatar.
First of all, the fact that Iran is Hamas's patron, that Iran has genocidal ambitions towards the Jewish people, calls the state of Israel a cancer that must be eliminated, that wants all of us, including me, dead. That's no secret. Iran is very open about that. And with the war that we saw Hamas unleashed on us on the 7th of October, that was a step in the plan of Iran and its regional parties, its regional proxies and terror groups towards advancing that end of murdering Jewish people and destroying the state of Israel, something we will obviously not allow them to do. Many of the weapons that we saw inside the Gaza Strip were produced inside Gaza, by the way, often by stealing resources away from ordinary people, stealing and diverting humanitarian aid in order to build their war machine. Just a few days ago, we saw a shocking video in which Hamas boasted that it had actually been digging up water pipes inside the Gaza Strip in order to convert them into rockets. The world is giving humanitarian aid to Gaza in order to support its economic development, and Hamas has been literally ripping water pipes out of the ground to turn them into rockets and shoot them at us. Now, as for your question about other countries that have been giving Hamas support, Israel's position has been clear. Hamas is ISIS. It must be treated as such, as an enemy of humanity, an enemy of civilization, an enemy of peace. No country may have diplomatic relations with it. No country may give it safe shelter or harbor. And we expect the world to impose sanctions on any country giving harbor to the masterminds of the brutal terrorists who conducted the ISIS-style atrocities of the 7th of October, which have left over 1,300 of our people dead, nearly 4,000 injured, and 200 people hostages inside the Gaza Strip right now.
Now worried about reports that are now coming in with regards to Saudi Arabia, that they have now put the normalization of ties with Israel on an ice pack. What really happens to that? Because a lot of effort was being made by the United States of America to ensure that Saudi Arabia comes around. How exactly is Israel taking this forward with regards to Saudi Arabia?
As I mentioned, Hamas committed a crime against humanity, and it committed a crime against India as well. We all remember the very exciting headlines just a few months ago at the G20 with the dramatic announcement of the plan to connect India through Saudi Arabia to Israel and onto Europe with a transportation corridor in order to help India export its goods, connect better into the global economy, support its development. And what Hamas did with this attack was an attack on peace and normalization in the Middle East. It was a direct attack on the hopes to integrate the global economy, to bring India closer into the Middle East, to connect it through Saudi Arabia and Israel, because Hamas, supported by Iran, don't want peace or prosperity or security. They want to export a barbaric agenda of terrorism, of butchery, of murder. They don't support development, they don't support prosperity, and they're actively trying to sabotage attempts towards normalization in the Middle East. And we hope that after victory, after we destroy Hamas, after we make sure that it can never again perpetrate these sorts of atrocities again, we will create the conditions in the Middle East to move towards greater regional peace, greater regional normalization, having eliminated one of the most evil terrorist organizations, perhaps the most evil terrorist organization in the region. And that will be a benefit not only for Israel, not only for the region, but for the wider world, including all of you, dear viewers in India.
Mr. Levy, while this action is being taken, much needed action against Hamas, is Israel also considering or working parallelly with other Middle Eastern countries to at least build the much needed consensus? Because this time around, perhaps there can be no nudge, wink, wink approach while dealing with terrorism. So you do need the Middle Eastern countries. Can you confirm to us whether at all you are in touch, whether back channel talks are basically going on with other Middle Eastern countries?
Israel enjoys extensive diplomatic relations with very many Middle Eastern countries, not only Egypt and Jordan, with which we've had peaceful relations for decades, but also thanks to the Abraham Accords more recently with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, and of course, contacts with all sorts of forces around the Middle East. Obviously, I can't get into the details of back-channel conversations. They are, by their nature, conversations that we don't talk about on television. But Israel is, of course, concerned, first of all, to win this war against the ISIS-style terror machine that unleashed the atrocities of the 7th of October, and to do that so that we can enjoy more peace and prosperity in the Middle East, so that we can restore security, the security that our people deserve, the security that our people need, and we expect the whole world to rally to our cause. And I think, really, with this atrocity, unlike other Hamas attacks, and this is, of course, not the first Hamas terror attack, and our country has bled terribly because of Hamas's brutal terrorism against us, but I think this time the world really understands with, I'll repeat, the worst terror attack in world history after 9/11. In absolute terms, the death toll is now half a 9/11. The world understands that Hamas can exist no longer, and that is why Israel has a right and it has a duty to ensure that this terrorist machine inside the Gaza Strip is destroyed.
Mr. Levy, one final question that I would like to take with you is with regards to what is it that you are seeking at this point in time from India? Let's understand that your Prime Minister and Prime Minister Modi enjoy a fantastic relationship, a personal equation too. Is there anything that Israel expects from India? And perhaps the talks that have taken place so far, is there anything in the near future, a tangible aspect that you're expecting from India?
First of all, Israel greatly appreciates the outpouring of support that we have seen from India. India is a country that has a very special place in many Israelis' hearts because it's almost a rite of passage for many Israelis after their military service to go backpacking around India and exploring its extraordinary, diverse civilization. It's a country that we love very much, and so it's very heartwarming that in times of crisis, in times of war, we have such outpouring from people inside India reaching out to check we're okay, expressing support from Israel. And it's a welcome change, actually, from the scenes that we've seen in other places in the world where, I can't believe I'm even saying it, but people have been expressing support and solidarity with Hamas and with its brutal terror attacks against the people of Israel. And in India, we've seen an outpouring of support. And I hope that as we enter the next phase of what is going to be a very difficult conflict, because this is a war that Israel is determined to win, and it's determined to win so that Hamas can never again perpetrate these atrocities, India will continue to remain by our side, continue to loudly support our right and our duty to defend our people, and to pursue that legitimate military goal, which is to make sure that ISIS, just like Hamas, is destroyed, so it can no longer harm our people or any of the other people it murdered, butchered, massacred, or abducted from 42 nations on the 7th of October.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Levy, for joining us on this broadcast. And I must tell you, from everyone here at Republic Newsroom, prayers for you, your family members, and each and every one in Israel to stay safe.
Thank you very much. We
but
really,
before I let you
really
go,
do
I'd
appreciate
also like
it.
to take the opportunity to send across one message. Mr. Levy, just one small message that I want to send across from everyone here at Republic Media Network. The last time Israel Prime Minister spoke to any Indian news channel, it was Republic Media Network. We are hoping that in better times, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would once again choose Republic Media Network to address all viewers in South Asia. That's a request coming in from one of the leading South Asian networks.
We're all hoping for better times. Thank you very much for your thoughts and prayers.
That was Israel Prime Minister Office's spokesperson talking about various aspects of what they're calling the second phase of the war. That's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive. On the other side, news and updates continue.